Hey Gerard, what's up? It's Woody. I wanted to follow up with you about some of the work that we had talked about. So, just to review, this is this is can you see that? So this is the initial drawing, my first understanding of the piece by Bresson called Abruzzi. So I figured out the areas of the places where I saw contrast, which is appealing to me. There's some funny copy at the top. It says, "The narcoleptic soldier sits idly by." It's, so the next thing that you saw of mine was the the movie that I made on posted on YouTube, and uh, and after that I did a sketch from memory. So I did a sketch from memory, and this is the sketch. This is the sketch that I made from memory of Abruzzi's study. So there are these lines that come across. I particularly like this one because it creates this vanishing point that pulls on the edge. A vanishing point would typically go like this if if there's um, if there's something in the foreground that continues to pull your eye up, and then that thing in the foreground, it's some kind of like it's some kind of house. I don't know what kind of house it is, but it's some kind of house. So this is another house that has these doors that I remember. That could be imaginative, but what we talked about were the use of uh, weight, right? So you recommended using 9B down to 9H down to 2B, where 2B is soft and 9H is hard. So I started to do what I had, which is I had a 2B. So I started putting in the darker lines here. I think that this is interesting. I think that where the railing comes out, it's right at like the third of the page. One, two. It's at the third of the page. This is, like I said, a sketch from memory. So I created these. I created these steps because they make this like curved pattern there she is. So there's the woman and she's holding a pastries, and then it goes down like this, and you can see like it curves. So I was trying to understand that, and in the next page, I'll show you how I began to understand that using what we talked about with atmospheric perception and the use of lines contradicting, like vertical versus horizontal lines that allow the eye to see depth, to understand depth. So let's move there. Okay. This is on an opposite page from another piece, but let's see. Okay. Let's see this. Okay, so this is Study of Abruzzi by Bresson by atmospheric perception. I started at the bottom. I started here, where there's this heavy line out, and that heavy line continues to go down at a nice angle. And there are these lines, these vertical line or horizontal lines that are behind the vertical line. And one way that you can tell that, I'm sorry, behind the angled line, there are these vertical lines, and these vertical lines are of equal value to this thick line that gives this height, this idea of height that um, progressively progressively recedes. The horizontal lines in the background are lighter colored and thinner. This this is a show of it's a depth perception. I'm blanking on the name right now. There's a rounded corner here that's very subtle. There's a rounded corner that brings that thin line progressively thinner into this space back here. This is a blind spot. From here, there's a really nice arch that forms. And one thing that I find particularly interesting about this arch, can you see it? Yeah, right there. One thing that I find particularly interesting about this arch is that the right point over here, it is it's lower than the left point. It's slightly lower than the left point. And that does a few things. That again reinforces the perspective from where the photographer was standing, and the line is heavy. It's this like wrought iron, so that line is heavy, and I suspect that this arch follows a root 2 oval. A root 2 oval would be, if I draw a line from this point to this point, I can create a 90-degree angle here to make a square, and at the other end of that square would be the rest of that oval. So there are other lines that get progressively tighter to create this vanishing point that you don't even see, and it's a light line that gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes. So you might use one of those darker, like maybe a 4B, and like start with the 4B and use less intensity with your pressure as it goes back in space. That idea of going back in space, that's one that is very important to understand on a two-dimensional surface. In the top right corner, or I'm sorry, in the top left corner, there are faint triangle structure. In the top left corner, it shows extreme distance through many air molecules absorbing and reflecting sunlight. I'm not sure what is here. Some rectangle, I think. I'm not sure what is here, but I remembered something dark, two dark things. In my mind, the one over here towards the right is a little bit bigger than the one in the left, and that might be because a road or something like this creates a vanishing point over here, so it gets tighter. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what this is. This is unsure. I'm not sure what that is. Now over here is a blind spot, um, and that blind spot comes from here. There's a darker path down in the bottom right corner, and you can see detail of the cobblestone there. That detail is recessed progressively. Bop, it's recessed here, until at the corner is really interesting. Can you see the corner? The corner is really interesting. It's a completed recession of the detail of the cobblestone. There is a rounded bend, but it's really hard to like see it. It's really hard to understand it, because this is where the point where there is no definition of the cobblestone. So moving back in space, it just becomes white. So that, I think, is one of those things that we challenge ourselves to draw what we see, not what we know. In the bottom left corner of the photograph, can you see that? In the bottom left corner of the photograph, there are varying levels of intensity. So I wrote them out in percentage. So this wall is 18% gray. It's actually 18% gray is actually the stone that the woman is walking on, and she's flanked by a 12% gray over here. This moves back in light patterns progressively. So it goes 8%, and then goes 10% gray, and then 8%, or 12, 10, 8% gray. And there's a contrast here because there's some kind of wall, and it goes from 35%, which is in contrast to the 8%, to 45% gray, which is relatively dark. There is a white object beside a very dark object right here, kind of right in the middle, and it's neat. It's a nice little play. It feels good. Okay. So let's see, how'd that get lit before? There we go. So Gerard, that's the work that I did since we met, and I started a little sketch of it. Hope you're doing fine. Talk to you soon.